You don't build a multiple six-figure planning business over 16 years by relying on luck. You do it by knowing how to lead a client conversation and close it. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through how I just did a 5-figure consultation with a luxury bride planning a destination wedding while she's in law school. You'll learn how I handled her objections, guided the budget conversation, and earned her trust, all without sounding salesy. This is the CEO version of selling, and it works. Let's get tactical. The perfect consultation that leads to a sale is really broken down into 4 parts. The first part is all about them, and it really is all about human connection. So in this section of the consult, you literally are not pitching, you're not selling, you're not trying to get into anything that you do. You're just learning about them as a human, not even necessarily about their wedding. I want to know how they got engaged, how they met, how long they've been dating, what they like to do together, where they live, if they're in school, how the proposal happened, if it was a surprise, all the things. And in this section of the consultation, I really want to treat it like I'm talking to a good friend that just got engaged. Like I lean in, I really use my body language, even if I'm on Zoom, to help them really get that feeling that I'm invested. And I am. I'm not treating this like a list of questions that I have to ask. I'm treating it like a conversation that I'm just kind of bouncing from one question to the next because I'm listening to what they're saying and asking the next logical question. I genuinely am invested in their story in this beginning part of the conversation because all I'm trying to do here is connect with them. People buy from people they know, like, and trust. So this is where the know and like is coming in. I want to get to know them. I want them to get to know me a little bit, and we're just chatting. We're just having a conversation. So this first 10 minutes is all about that. Now, as I start to turn the conversation, I want the questions to become a little bit more geared towards their wedding. So I start to ask about their proposal, then I start to ask about how they chose their wedding date, their venue, things like that. And I start to turn the conversation towards what vendors that they've booked, what's been difficult about their planning, what would be something that they would love to see at their wedding or something that they would absolutely hate to see at their wedding. It's still me asking questions, but I've gone from now a human connection to really understanding their pain points. And all of this is in that beginning section of discovery, of understanding. What is it exactly that they're looking for in what you do? So as they're talking and they think you're just simply asking questions because you're curious, you're listening for pain points. And a lot of times clients won't verbalize this as necessarily a pain point. They won't say something like, oh my gosh, this is the most difficult part of the process, or I really need help with X, but often they are giving you clues as to what could be difficult for them by saying things like, we have really busy jobs, or we live out of state and flying in every weekend is obviously not possible. Those are pain points for them that are keeping them up at night that you can start to bank. So when you go into selling, you can start to really sell to those pain points that they've shared with you. Now, I told you guys in the beginning that I was walking you through a consult that I actually did recently for Blush, my planning company. And so let me give you a few examples of what that looks like. In the beginning, when I was talking to this bride specifically about her engagement, she was very excited, very animated, wanted to share all of the details with me, including how the ring was designed, where he proposed, all of the things. And so it was important that I match that energy, that I mirror it. And so in this conversation, I leaned in a lot of times and it looked something like this. No way. And so I moved my microphone because I want you guys to be able to see me leaning in. But when you're on Zoom, that leaning in, that energy is so important. Now, the other side of that would be if you have a client who isn't expressive, who isn't overly excited, who isn't giving you a lot of details and is kind of reserved, you need to match that energy as well. Because if you overwhelm them with all of this excitement and that's just not their personality type, you're going to shut that consultation down really, really quickly. So I call this mirroring, and it's a really important step in the process in the beginning to really mirror the energy that they're sharing with you. The second thing that we did was when she was talking about her pain points as we started to turn everything towards her wedding, one of the things that she said to me is, I'm in law school and I'm super concerned about planning a wedding from out of state. And so I'm not going to be able to fly in all the time. And that's one of the reasons that we're looking for a planner. Right there, I'm able to bank that, right? And so I said back to her, I totally understand. Actually, most of our full service clients don't live in state. And so I didn't go into then pitching our full service or to say why we're the best. I simply let her know that's something that's normal for us and that we can handle no problem, right? By just saying, yeah, that's actually totally normal for us, is for our clients not to live in state. A lot of our clients travel to Orlando to get married, right? So immediately I'm just quickly interjecting. I'm letting her know we're an expert already. I'm kind of letting her shoulders go down and say, oh, okay, that's something that already is common. Like for her, she's thinking planning a destination wedding is something that's really not that common, but it is for us. And so we're already implanting that we're the experts that can help her by just saying this is totally normal for us. Okay, this next section is often overlooked, but it's talking about their budget. And this is so important for many reasons. One, most couples that come and sit down in front of a wedding vendor, especially a venue or a planner who are one of the first vendors booked, they genuinely have no idea what their budget looks like yet, or they don't know whether it's realistic. And so being confident in talking about the budget is going to pose you as an expert. So this is something that is wildly important. It's also important whether you're further along in the process. Maybe you're the DJ or the florist. Being able to talk about the budget makes that barrier kind of break down, right? And that's what we're trying to do in our consultation, is break down that know, like, and trust. And this is a section where they are going to trust. You're building trust here. So talking about the budget, most of the time, the answer you're going to get when you say, have you considered your budget yet, is I don't know, or we haven't talked about it yet, or I'm not sure. That's the answer you're going to get most of the time, right? Every once in a while, you're going to get a budget range and then you can start from there. But I'm going to use the example of them saying, I really don't know. And here's where the trust factor comes in. You are then going to present them back some numbers. Now, this is one of my favorite things to do because I think it's so important to discuss budget right in the consultation, because price is the number one objection, right? So we want to make sure that we're presenting price and talking about their budget and how realistic it is right from the beginning. So if we're having this conversation where they say, I'm not really sure what my budget is, you can say to them, because now you've done all of this discovery, okay, great. Well, based on everything that you've told me, I think you're going to spend X. Now, let me use a photographer as an example. Let's say that a photographer is sitting down with a couple and, they've obviously seen a price range on the website, hopefully by the time they're sitting down for a consultation, but you're talking through, you're getting their discovery, you're understanding their pain points. You were starting to really understand which one of your services they're going to need, because you are the pro. You're the one who knows this. So you're going to want to be able to lead them towards that yes. Everything you're doing is leading them towards a yes, but it's really hard to do that if you can't help them to understand what that looks like. What I want you to do here is, if they say, we don't really know what our budget is, you would say something like, okay, based on everything that you've told me so far, your ceremony's at 2:00 at the Catholic Church, your reception starts at 5. I think that you're going to need a minimum of 10 hours. And here's how that would look. My team would show up at this time. We would do your getting ready. It would look like, you've got that time in between to take formal photos. Then we head over to the reception, all the things, right? I'm going to suggest that you're going to need that 10-hour package. And that typically runs about, 10-5. How does that feel for you? Because now, instead of you just saying, well, our service includes all of these things, and we have this package, we have this package, we have this package, they don't know what they need. But instead, what you did there was you took all of their discovery, you reiterated back to them, their ceremonies at this time, their receptions at this time, formal photos are important to them, they want to have downtime, all the things they've told you in discovery, you've reiterated that back to them, you've told them why you're choosing the package that you're choosing, and you're presenting them a budget. And then you're able to ask, how does that feel? Because right there, they're going to be able to give you a price objection if they have one, or they're going to give you a mini yes. And mini yeses are so important during the consultation process. We want them to be nodding their head or saying, yes, this is perfect the entire way. And if they're not, we want to handle that objection. So in this case, this bride told me that her budget was around $120,000. So based on everything that we had talked about to that point, one of the things she was greatly concerned about was how realistic that budget was. And because we'd done so much discovery, I was able to say to her, well, based on everything we've talked about, here's where I think we may go over budget. She had a wild floral board, which was great, but it would have pushed us over the budget. And so I explained explained why that would happen, but I also explained a couple of ways that we could get creative with the floral based on what she'd sent us in her Pinterest and how we could possibly stay within that 120. But I also asked, is there any flexibility in that budget? And she said, yeah, there is. If it's something that I absolutely want, we do have some flexibility, but I'd like to stay as close to it as possible. And so me being able to walk her through some of the things she said she wanted and what would work and possibly not work in that service was so helpful to do right there in that conversation, because one of her biggest pain points was, is my budget realistic for what I'm looking for? Because we were able to gain her trust by walking her through what that would look like. It was incredibly helpful. Now, one thing I don't want you to hear me say, I didn't do a line item budget with her. I didn't give her a full breakdown of step by step every single dollar she was going to spend. One of the caveats I actually like to say as a planner, and I think a lot of venues and florists can use this as well, when you're tossing pricing out live right there on the console, one of the things I like to say is, obviously this is based on less than 30 minutes and talking to you about your wedding. So one of the first things that we do after this consult, once you become a client of ours, is to walk through your budget line by line, and we will create a step-by-step. Every single thing for your wedding will be line itemed out so that we all agree to your budget before we start booking vendors. But this is to give you a general idea of what I think you're going to spend based on what you've told me so far. And that kind of gives you that caveat of like, we're talking in broad strokes here, but I do want you to know about how much you're going to spend. And so this is a really important thing that every single vendor should be doing, because if they leave that consultation without having told you, yes, this pricing feels good to us, or no, it does not, you've lost them. So this bride told me about her budget. We walked through it. I was then able to present our pricing and how that looked in her budget. And when I was asking her, how does that feel for you? She was like, yes, that feels great. And the reason she was able to say that is because I guided her to know that her budget was realistic for what she was looking for. The third part of this process is to ask them what questions they have for you so you can sell to that. So what we do not do at this point, and the biggest mistake I see wedding pros make in their sales process, we do not start going through the list of everything included with our service, because they don't care, right? And for the most part, every planner that they're looking at does the same thing. Every florist that they're looking at is doing a similar thing. Every photographer is doing the same thing, generally. So what we want to do instead is not present them all the things that are included with the service. They've probably already looked at our services before the consult anyway, but we want to ask them, so what questions do you have for me about what we do? And so that's a really easy way to just see what's still out there for them, what's still lying out there. We want to understand, where are you in this process? Have you already done all of your research, or do you honestly forget which things that we do versus someone else? So we let them ask questions, and we only answer their questions. We do not go through a bullet point list of everything included with our packages, because that'll be included in their contract. So we don't need to do that. We only need to talk about the things that they care about. So they are going to ask questions. We're going to answer them. Now, the bride that I was talking to in this consultation was actually insanely well researched. And so she didn't have any questions for me at this point in the process. And that happens a lot. A lot of times a couple will say, oh, I don't think we have any questions. I think you've answered everything. And so that's when you can go into your pitch to really close them. But if they do have any questions, you want to make sure that you answer them there. Okay, and this last part of the process is to go into your pitch. But what I want you to think about is I want you to sell with service and value, not pressure. Here's what that looks like. After you've answered all of their questions, or if they don't have any, you can say something like, oh my gosh, Susie, I've loved getting to know you. I think that your wedding is going to be amazing. And I can't wait to see little Domino walking down the aisle in his bow tie. It's going to be so cute. So here's what I can do. I can go ahead and send a contract over to you via email today. You can review everything online, pay the retainer, and that'll lock your date into our calendar so that we can go ahead and get started in that first planning meeting. So that's called assuming the sale. That's how I close every single consult. Now, the burning question that everybody asks me, what if they say they're not ready for a contract? And that's exactly what happened in this consultation. So let me walk you through how we handled that. This bride said, I love this too. I think you guys are great and I would love to work with you, but I do have a few other calls later this week with other planners, and I just want to make sure that I do my research. Okay, so that's like the kryptonite to every wedding pro, right? You're like, no, I wanted to just close it right there. But the reality is, a lot of times our couples are doing their research. And so how do we respond to this? How do we handle this objection? This is what I want you to do. What I said to her was, oh my gosh, totally. That makes sense. This is a really big decision for you. And so I want to make sure that you do the research and that you speak to as many planners as you need to make sure that we're the right one. But before I let you go, can I ask you, is there anything that I haven't told you in this consultation that would help you to know right away that we're the one? And that is the question, you guys. That is the golden ticket question. Because the reality is, if they say, no, you've answered everything, like there's nothing else that you could tell me, the reality is they almost feel a little bit silly because they're like, why am I going to interview other people if they've already told me everything I need to know to make them the one? And so they almost feel a little bit silly, which is what happened in this case. This bride said, no, there's actually nothing. Like, you've told me everything and I love you guys and I think you'd be perfect. And I was like, okay, great. Well, what I'll do is, you said your calls with the other planners were Wednesday. So why don't I follow up on Thursday morning? Does that sound good for you? Always set a follow-up date. Always. And she said, yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Now, this was on a Monday. Okay. So I'm talking to her on Monday. She has 2 other calls on Wednesday, and then I'm going to follow up with her on Thursday. Really quick, what if you said, is there anything I haven't told you in this consultation that would help you to know that we're the one? And they said, a lot of times this is where they will give you the truthful answer. They'll say something like, I just really wish that you included an engagement session with your packages, because it's really important to us to do an engagement session. And I know you don't include one. And if we buy one, then it's going to push us over budget. Here's the thing. You want that kind of information because that allows you to handle the objection right there, instead of going to another photographer down the street. And then they're now trying to compare every single one of your bullet points, and they choose them because they're $200 cheaper. Like, you're going to lose a wedding because they're $200 cheaper? No, you want to present the value right there. You have the option to either just go ahead and throw in an engagement session if they'll sign their contract in the next 48 hours, or you have the option to explain why you don't include it and why you don't think it's necessary. Whatever you want to do is fine, but you want to know what that objection is. They might also say something like, you've told us everything and we love you. Like, we would genuinely love to work with you guys, but the reality is you're over budget and we just feel like we need to maybe try to find somebody that's more within our budget. That's when I would ask, I totally understand that budget's really important, right? Can I ask what you were planning to spend on a DJ? And they tell you, and then you are able to make the decision whether you can edit a package for them. At that point, you could say, okay, that's about $500 less than our packages, but tell me, do you feel like you need everything that we talked about in our package, or is there anything that you feel like isn't necessary for you? You can edit a package right there for them, customize it. Okay, so if I could make that adjustment for you and get closer to your price range, would we be an absolute yes? Yes, you would. Okay, great. Why don't I make that change? I'll go ahead and send the contract over, and if you can sign it in the next 48 hours, then we'll be locked in at that price. Like, you have the ability to say if you want to make an edit, or to say, I totally understand and I wish you luck, but if anything changes with your budget, let me know. If you want to stick firm to what you have, totally fine too. If anything changes with your budget, let me know, but I wish you guys all the best in your planning, right? But at least now you know as well not to follow up with them 400 times and they're ghosting you because they don't want to tell you they can't afford you. So this is how you're going to handle that objection. So you always want to know what the objection is and then what the follow-up is. If they're not going to sign right away, what the follow-up date is. Here's what happened with this client. We talked to her on a Monday. She had meetings with other planners on Wednesday. I was going to follow up on Thursday. On Tuesday morning, she sent me a text and she said, hey, Brandy, I've thought about it and I actually really loved meeting with you guys and I want to go ahead and lock you in as my planner. So can you go ahead and send me a contract? And I was like, of course I can. Yes. She signed and paid within an hour. And you guys, this was a 5-figure contract. So this was not a small contract. And the reason that she felt confident making that decision and not even meeting with the other planners was because exactly what I did at the end was trying to understand from her, what is it exactly that I haven't already told you that makes you know that we're the ones? She didn't have a reason. So when she goes back and starts talking with her fiance, it's like, well, if they're perfect and you loved them and they were within the price range, why are we waiting to talk to other people, right? And that's exactly what you want to happen. So much of this is all about the confidence in the way that you say it and because you know what you're going to deliver. And so CEO, I want you to understand, what is it that makes you different from everyone else that they're going to be interviewing? Who else is in your marketplace that is your biggest competition? And how do you look different? How do you sell your value above everyone else that they're going to be looking at? Because that is the key. That confidence that comes through so that they can know, like, and trust you is key to getting that yes right away. I didn't book this 5-figure client because I was lucky. I booked it because I helped her to see her pain points and I gave her the solution, which was us, that she needed. Inside of Wedding Pro CEO, I absolutely love having our coaching team be able to audit sales calls for our members. So they can drop a recording of one of their sales calls in. We will audit that and be able to help them to understand where they could have edited their words, how they could have handled objections differently. And if that's something that you're struggling with, if you're like, I want to be able to close better, I'd love to invite you to book a gap assessment with our team where we'll walk through exactly how your business is running now. And if we know that we can help you inside of Wedding Pro CEO, we'll walk through what those steps look like so that you can get those audits on your sales calls too, because we want you to have that super high conversion rate so that you can close 5-figure clients on repeat too. If you love this episode, make sure to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening to this, and I will see you next time.